Yeah, thanks for that wonderful introduction, Scott. As you mentioned, I'm Sonny here representing phData, and this is Brennan, who's the chemist in this story. So a quick agenda of some of the topics that we're going to run through today. I'm going to start off with a quick introduction of myself, my background, and how I upskilled in Knime. Then a quick description of what phData is and what we do. And then talk about the P&G phData relationship, how we came up to be here together. And then I'm going to hand it off to Brennan, who's going to talk about his background, some of the problem statements that he was facing at P&G, and finally bringing it back full circle and talk about how we use Knime to solve those problems on this project that we worked on together. So a quick bio of myself. I'm a former collegiate golfer at Columbia University. This is where I became introduced to the idea of analytics. The godfather of golf analytics, Mark Brody, was a professor at Columbia, and he came up with the statistic strokes gained. And if you've watched golf on TV over the past few years, I'm sure you've heard it mentioned before. And if you haven't, you could think of it as something like OPS or WAR in baseball. And this really introduced to me the power that analytics can have. So I don't come from a traditional analytics background. I started my career off in sales before making the transition. And my focus is mostly on data visualization with Tableau, as well as SQL for data wrangling. So, don't tell Brennan, but I had never used Knime before this year. But because of my previous SQL experience, as well as experience with other low-code tools, and because Knime is open source, low-code, and intuitive to learn, I was able to pick it up pretty quickly in order to deliver on this project. So I completed the L1 through L3 Knime certifications, as well as Data Coach's Knime Analytics Platform course. So what is phData? We're an end-to-end data consultancy. If you look at the picture in the top right, it highlights some of the services that we provide, everything from data strategy, data engineering, machine learning, to visualization. So what does this mean exactly? Obviously, those are a lot of buzzwords. To put it simply, we solve complex data problems. Our combination of technical skills plus soft skills to understand the business context in order to deliver results and answer problems for your company. And there's also the data coach element, which I alluded to in the previous slide. It's our learning platform that also adds on live coaching from industry experts in order to enable organizational upskilling. And we also have a wonderful booth in the back if people are interested in hearing more about phData. Okay, so the P&G and phData relationship. How did it come about that me and Brennan are here talking to you all on stage today? Well, P&G and phData have had a successful relationship for over 4+ years. Previous projects focused on data visualization as well as Python data science projects. So while Brennan was using Knime before, Knime was not something that we at phData were previously supporting. It was a gap in our tool capability, and the partnership has really grown over the past year in order to have people upskill in Knime and have this be a central service that we provide. And we found out that Knime promoted better collaboration between the two teams. So now I'm going to hand it off to Brennan, who's going to talk about his relationship using Knime over the years, and come back and talk about how we use Knime on this project. So
all right.
Here's Brennan.
Thank you, Sonny. I assume the big green button's the one I need to push. Awesome. So yes, Brennan Sessions, I've worked at P&G for about 10 years in a variety of different research and development roles. And one thing that Sonny had said about not knowing Knime before this year, I think speaks a lot about the intuitivity of Knime as well as their data coach platform from a learning standpoint. He could have fooled me. He had used Knime as an expert and showed me things that I had been using Knime for 4 years that I'd never known. So a little bit background on me as well. We did call our talk KNIMEline, so we're going to go through a little bit of my journey and Sonny's journey as far as how we've gone and continued to improve how we use Knime. So I am from Texas. It's nice being back in Texas, even though I was hoping for a little bit warmer weather than Cincinnati, Ohio. It looks like I brought it with me, or I hear some of the folks from Germany may have brought it with them. But as a chemist, I started at P&G and doing a kind of a traditional product development kind of a role in the lab, making prototypes, mixing materials together, trying to come up with that next product that we were going to market and put on the shelf. While it was exciting and I was good at it, eventually I realized that I was doing things that I was very familiar with, and I wanted to go outside of my comfort zone and learn something new. This isn't where Knime comes in yet. But I did go into a separate kind of area, more in the engineering space. How do I take what we're making in the lab and scale it up into a manufacturing environment and really learn about not only the data that we generate, but also the systems that we work with. So I got really into getting Excel reports out of different systems and really knowing how to answer pretty much any question that came. But I was an N of one, and I was doing things very inefficiently, working in system after system. And then I found out about Knime. And now I've worked my way into a new role where I'm still in research and development, but I'm fully focused on data activation and automation. So really, how do we answer questions that, like technical questions I might receive over and over and over again in real time? Kind of a common problem statement here, I think. So I like to think about the type of question that I get and how I have to solve it as a Rubik's Cube. So we may have multiple different systems that we're pulling data from to be able to say, this is the answer to that question. But you really need to be an expert or really good at problem solving or know the specific algorithm to solve that problem. And to make this a little bit more visual is we have systems that are somewhat siloed from one another. Manufacturing environments, the research and development data, lab information, quality. Our supply chain is one of the largest supply networks in the world, and how do we get a hold of that data and have it connect to these other systems? And marketing, you've probably seen a Mr. Clean commercial today, so we have a lot of marketing information as well. But trying to go into each of these systems requires specific expertise, and this is where Knime has been able to help us kind of solve the Rubik's Cube. Good, the animation works.
There you go.
And tell a holistic single story that really would take hours or somebody who's really good at navigating those systems to do. Now we can bring that to folks in a moment's notice with real-time data. So some of our problem statements that we had where we approached phData with is complex data structure. So that previous slide talked to the differences between our systems and how we need to get those to talk to one another better, but also the data itself. So if you think about a bottle of Tide, and for the European colleagues or folks here, it's going to be a different product, I think Ache. But if you use just a bottle of Tide, you take it home, you wash your laundry with it. In our systems, it's all of the components that are individually structured and built that all have to work together. It's the packaging, the bottle, the cap, the liquid that goes inside, which is made of a bunch of materials, the packaging that all of that stuff goes into to make it to our retailers, the supply network of getting the stuff to us and getting our products to our distribution network, the plant that has all of the equipment that's working together, and then, of course, the way that we test and make sure that our products are performing the way they need to, the quality controls that we have. This is just the tip of the data iceberg that we have, but it paints a picture that we need to be able to have our scientists or researchers go in and understand how to navigate this kind of complex environment across multiple systems in an intuitive way. Which kind of gets to our second problem statement of productivity and efficiency, as well as organizational upskilling. So how do we change and transform the current work processes, the old paper-based world that we lived in, and how do we move into the digital age? And I think Knime, with its interface, very visual to see, going from step to step to step, you don't have to be a master programmer or fluent in Python to be able to do some pretty cool things. So when my Knime journey began, probably similar to some of you, it was not really doing a lot of really high-tech stuff. I was getting some of those Excel reports that I was getting out of my systems, and I was taking Excel reports that I was getting from some colleagues, and I was trying to use Knime to do some pretty much just Excel macros, but leveraging Knime. And I thought this was the coolest thing in the world. I thought I had solved all of the problems that I needed to solve, but I was still in this model of getting asked a question, getting the data, manipulating it, and giving a response. And it wasn't really in that living, instantaneous world like we would get from, say, visiting Amazon. You're always going to see what's current. Something changed, you're probably familiar with it, that made me have to think differently to answer problems in real time. The pandemic, and if you know anything about Procter Gamble, we also make toilet paper. If you know anything about pandemics and toilet paper, we had a big spike in demand for a lot of our products. We also make cleaning products. People were washing their groceries. We make over-the-counter cough cold medicines, which help treat symptoms related to COVID. And so when we think about the demand for our products, were we ready to respond and produce to compensate for that? Well, something else that happened during a pandemic is with global supply chains where we get materials from all around the world, all of those components that I had shown, We distribute our products all around the world. At the very beginning of the pandemic, borders started closing, and we were in crisis management mode. We needed to be able to meet the needs of our customers and make sure that they got the products that they needed. But we also needed to take into account what we were receiving from our suppliers to say that we're going to be able to have minimal impact and be able to produce as much as we can to help consumers get the products that they need. And so this is what we did. It's kind of a chaotic workflow here. But we needed to bring information together, not using these Excel reports that was taking hours a day to just try to compile an answer, where we needed to bring things together like our bill of materials, which you can think of as like a recipe for making something. We needed to know who are we allowed to use, who can we receive our materials by, what different manufacturing sites can receive different supply materials. What do we currently have on hand? Things that just kind of make sense, like what do you need to know before you start doing your scenario planning? And then we had to take in real-time demand changes. So as Costco is selling out of the Charmin multi-packs, how do we see that, okay, now we need to provide more of that in real time, something that was not able to be forecasted. And how do we bring in the supplier projections that they're saying, hey, we're not going to be able to ship because our border's closed. And be able to say, okay, now that we pull this all together, we can start answering questions and making decisions really quickly rather than spending all of our time every day just pulling together information, having multiple regional review meetings around the world to make sure that the data looks good, just to compile it and already be out of date and not being able to react to the current situation. So Knime, in our case, and being able to automate this work process, we could design into the system what all of our experts were doing logically in the manual kind of interface. And so here, I think the really important kind of learnings is being able to use our time and our experts' time reviewing the data rather than collecting the data. That was a big win for us from a productivity standpoint. Removing dozens or hundreds of hours a week of just data collection, and being able to have one global meeting where we could decide this is the decision we need to make. We need to move material from this site to this site so we can make this product. It was really a change in the game, and this is where phData comes in. My leadership saw that we can now do things differently. We can answer questions faster. I was the only person with a fishing pole in my organization, so how do we answer a lot of different types of questions? How do we get more fishing poles out there? Well, I'm going to let Sonny talk about that, where they came in and kind of helped us upskill and take it to the next level.
Awesome. Thanks, Brendan. So where we came in is that if you remember Brendan's example from a couple slides ago with that Rubik's Cube and with the Tide bottle with all the different parts, how can we bring all those parts into one piece together and solve the Rubik's Cube for Brendan so that him and his team can leverage the data that they need to do what they do best instead of spending their time finding the data? So, clicker. Okay, so this starts off with the workflow. The first thing that you'll notice with this workflow compared to the one that Brendan showed earlier is that we implemented a lot of workflow design, building best practices in terms of adding annotations as well as the use of meta nodes. And I want to open up one of these meta nodes. The meta nodes really hide a lot of the complexity that's going on underneath. A lot of what's going on here is a lot of data manipulation, a lot of data wrangling, as well as a ton of joiner nodes bringing in different data source systems together. And this is where the collaboration part comes in, because while I had the technical skills to be able to put this workflow together, I needed to rely on Brendan and his colleagues to know which tables that I should be pulling from and how to join them in order to get an output that Brendan and his team were expecting to see. So this was the first half of it. Now that we've created the data set, this still doesn't solve the Rubik's Cube problem and bring everything together. So we added on an extra layer of visualization. So these are two of the dashboards that we created, the summary specification view as well as the document clock. While these may not look like much, there's actually a lot that's going on underneath. With the summary specification view, a user can put the product name in the top left and instantly be able to see all of the parts that go into the product, basically solving that Rubik's Cube problem. And if they don't know their product name, they can use the document clock to easily filter on the product they need in order to navigate to the summary specification view to get their insights and do what them and their team do best. So, and correct me if I'm wrong, Brendan, but this is something that would be saving your team countless of hours per week.
well, at least it's going to save me a lot of time. But yes, if we could even answer this question, where a lot of times we just get lost digging through our systems, that having something like this is like having Google for the first time with the data that you need, at least, where trying to get the right answer is something that could take us hours to do, and now it hopefully can take us seconds. So yes, big productivity wins. So what's next for us? So we've kind of taken you a little bit along the development journey that I'm on, and hearing some of the cool things that I've heard from last night and this morning. I realize that I'm very early on in my Knime journey, but hopefully some of these things are relatable, and where we're setting our focus on right now is how do we leverage this kind of, for us, newfound ability to see all of the stuff that's in our different systems together and see where are we consistent, where are we not consistent, where are we typing the same thing multiple times that we could be integrating across systems. So really using Knime to help us make some better decisions when it comes to data quality improvements and making sure that we are as robust and clean as we can be, because that's going to be a precursor, I think, to setting us up when it comes to AI and machine learning automation. We really need to know that we're consistent on how we're pulling our data together. Automated formula design, this is what I'm really excited about. We're kind of in the preliminary phases of this, but with all that prototyping that I talked about, we're in the lab making a lot of different versions of Cascade, of Tide, of NyQuil, whatever it might be. How do we take all of the learnings that we have from each of those prototypes, from in the lab to consumer studies to clinical data, and try to say, how do we recommend the best product for whatever type of benefit that we're doing, whatever market that we're distributing it to, rather than having to go through this iterative prototyping process that we're doing today. So hopefully, now that I know more about hubs, thank you, Michael and team, I'd love to eventually share kind of things that we learn as we go. And then, of course, the organizational upskilling part. We have a lot of researchers, scientists, engineers, and people that need to be focusing on that. But how do we have people also layering on top of those technical expertise areas the new way of thinking? And so that's another thing that I just love about Knime is when I pull up a Knime workflow, in front of leadership or somebody that I'm trying to say, this is how I answered your question, the eye, you've probably all seen it as well, the eyes just go wide, like, what is this? It's magic. And it's like showing somebody like how an engine works under the hood of a car. And so really I want to also use Knime, as well as a lot of the information I've learned today about the hub, to go back to my teams and be able to say, here's how you can get into using Knime, here's how it works, and start having people think about our traditional work processes differently. So I think that's pretty much what we had covered. We have some time for Q&A. Yeah.
Let's get some questions. So I learned a couple things there from the presentation. Number one, I learned that Brennan is also an Aggie, like I am. That means we went to Texas A&M University, and it also means if you know anything about collegiate rivalries in this part of the world, that I now have an ally on stage, so that's important. The second thing I learned, I appreciated what you had to say about getting management, basically explaining your workflow to management. I find that's one of the really big advantages of Knime, is to be able to say, like you said, look under the hood, instead of explaining to someone, here's my 500 lines of Python. Yeah. Let's look at this workflow together, tell the story of our analysis. It just speeds up the decision-making process, right? So I appreciated hearing that from you. We're going to go ahead and take some questions from around the room here. We've got a few minutes. We have some microphones. You guys go ahead and stand up. Oh, okay, there we go. Alex has some at the back. Christiana has some. If you have a question for these folks, please raise your hand. We'll bring a mic over to you, and then you can quiz them mercilessly. Anybody? Surely we have one or two here.
Guess we explained it perfectly.
Yeah. I guess you did. Now there's another. Oh, here we got one down here at the front. Here's a brave soul.
Volumes of data where you're moving.
Okay. So let's get that question on the mic so that our folks online can hear it.
Oh, I wasn't loud enough?
Yeah.
What volumes of data were you moving?
So yeah, how much data are we talking about that you were moving around?
Yeah, so I can probably speak to it in terms of rows, and we were dealing with tens of millions of rows of information. If you think about the example that I shared on the Tide components, that's one product. We have the travel size, we have the Costco 55-gallon size, we have all of the different iterations that also need the different versions for different countries where you have different languages on our labels. So when you think about each of the iterations of products within a specific product type and the hundreds of products that we make across, from diapers anywhere to razors and so on, there's a lot in there. And so we're talking to the tens of millions to hundreds of millions of rows of information. And that's really all the stuff that we've gotten to so far is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to like having the ability to find those records is one cool thing, but when we want to layer on lab data, which wasn't really shown in there, how do we handle that massive amount of data in some Viz app that we can make sure that we're not spending so much time processing that the visual isn't actually usable. So that's where we're currently balancing. And it's really fun from a chemist's background side of things to learn this because I didn't know anything about any of this. Excel was kind of foreign to me. And so I'm really looking forward to engaging the community better. But thank you. Hopefully that answered your question. I don't know as far as data storage size, but.
Yeah, non-trivial amounts of data.
No.
Let's say, okay. Any other questions that we've got here in the room? We've got two in the back. Let's go right here, Alex.
Thanks for your presentation. Was your solution a side project that you kind of worked on and then eventually got buy-in and approval from management, or was it kind of formally approved by management and then you went and sought out a vendor to help you build something out?
Yeah, so originally it was a necessity. So in the pandemic example, it was something there where they when management tasked us to say, let's go have an automated tool that will tell you your inventory situation, what you needed to do. I needed something, and Knime was luckily already something I was aware of that I could lean on. So as far as me being a chemist and then having this, that was an evolution where at first it was a side project that I'm like, I can just start doing things more efficient for myself. And then it became we can make these really cool solutions that we couldn't make before. And then that started getting the management to say, okay, well, yes, we need you to fully focus on this. And now we need you to train others. And the training others piece was the difficult part for me when it came to, I'm in the same boat with a lot of people from an experience standpoint. I needed some guns, which is where we went to phData and said, hey, can you come in and help teach us some foundational principles that we just don't have? And yeah, hope that answered your question.
Does that answer the question? We've got one there in the back.
Thank you. Did all of this work help get away from spreadsheets? Or are you still using spreadsheets as input? And then the second question is, having made this data visible to management, has that helped in any of the data consolidation and establishment of authoritative data sources for your company?
Yeah, so for the first part of that question, remind me again, sorry. Thank you. Getting away from Excel spreadsheets. So I would say if I had it wasn't a light switch. And so as more automated sources we could move to, so different databases that are available, we have moved to them. But in some systems have not quite developed their either SQL or Databricks or whatever data source that we have. If they don't have like a direct link we can query against, there are some cases where we're still using some manual reporting, but it's getting smaller and smaller every day. I'd probably say to the scale of like 10% of our data sources now are coming somewhat manually. But the vast majority of what we're pulling together is coming from automated systems. And from the second part of your question about the leadership, I think getting towards leadership, is it trusting the data? Is that kind of where you were coming from? We have some tools that are kind of talking about how is every individual production line across each of our manufacturing facilities operating, kind of putting a score against it to say, this line at this plant is hitting 100% of its quality targets and production targets, and this line at this plant has some opportunities, and it helps leadership know where to focus rather than having to go and have a review with each site and realize, okay, here's your opportunities, here's your opportunities. This gives them a new way to look at the data and dissect it and say, okay, well, we need to go do some investments at this site and some training at this site and have some more specific decisions they can make that, before I think this is just such a new way of doing this kind of work for us.
Excellent. What else? We've still got a few minutes for these folks, so anything for Sonny or yeah, down here at the front. Here comes Christiana. She's dashing forward.
Sorry, remind me again, like what, I guess, team or department you were with when you first started working with Knime?
So I was in it was called current business R&D, if you want to think of it like that. So you have the folks who are developing the prototypes, the next version of the products, and I was currently in current business R&D. So this is supporting the current portfolio on the market. If you have a supplier that's single sourced, is what we call them, only one supplier of a specific thing, sitting in Florida, and a hurricane comes through, what's your business plan to make sure that you can keep on producing? How do you find a second supplier and things like that? And if a plant has some challenges, we're kind of the SWAT team that would go in and troubleshoot those challenges. And so really, I think of it as like the Swiss Army knife of R&D, where you have to know a little bit about all of the different aspects of research and development just to make sure that you keep supporting the business. And another kind of measure for what's successful in that role is if you don't know about us, we're doing our jobs right, because cases are still going out the door.
Were y'all the initial team to have use cases of Knime or start instituting it, or were there already other teams established? And if you were the first one, has that spread already to other departments and other teams picking it up? Because we're all in finance for the most part.
Yeah, I'm really happy that you asked that, because that was something I meant to mention earlier. And I've heard two different numbers from different Knime folks here, that we have somewhere between 5,000 and 13,000 Knime users at P&G. We have a lot of us. I'm not saying that I'm here as the expert of any of those. There's people who are way better at Knime than I am. But we have people from the marketing teams, from the finance teams, from the sales and distributions teams, all using Knime in different ways. And with that size and that scale of Knime users at P&G, I think there's a great opportunity with some of the stuff that I heard earlier about how do we collaborate and learn from each other and help onboard and upskill. But how I found Knime was really just curiosity. It was something when I saw it the first time, I had that wide-eyed expression that was when someone said it's free to download and pretty intuitive. I was like, let me give it a shot. And every day has become more and more and more of my personal work process. And so I've had 3 interns over the past 3 summers where I just said, let me see if I can prove that we can do work differently and have them fully focus on using Knime and some visualization tools. Now that I know about data apps, that's something I definitely want to go and explore. We've been able to demonstrate 3 successful times with different interns that we can, if we invest in training and onboarding and using Knime, that this could be something that's the primary tool for getting work done. So hopefully that answered your question.
Cool. And I'll just, you mentioned the Swiss Army knife team, Swiss Army knife tool. We often hear Knime referred to as that, so it's a good match. Yeah. Maybe just briefly, I had a question. You mentioned you have thousands of users at P&G, right? And you also mentioned the need for upskilling on your team. So do you have immediate plans for that?
So I'm not part of the core corporate Knime relationship team, where they have a lot of if a new version of Knime comes out, how they roll that out and deploy it, how do they get people access and whatnot. But I do want to follow up with them and see what they're planning, because there is some Knime kind of hubs internally where there's knowledge bases and communities of practice and a lot of really, really good office hour kind of things where, like the workflow doctor here. But I do want to see what their plans are, because I think hearing all of the great things about the community engagement here, I think if we're not leveraging that, I'd be curious why not, and how could we better leverage it. And know when to also go to companies like phData, because sometimes we don't have the skill set and we need to answer something fast. And that's where they really provided value for us.
Well, excellent. Well, I think we'll wrap this session in. Thank you, Sonny. Thank you, Brennan, for sharing with us about what's going on at phData and P&G.
Yeah.
If we give these guys a hand, everybody. Thanks very much.